And welcome to The Bottom Line, where we break down the most pressing business and economic stories of the day. Poland's economy may not be faring as well as expected. The country's branch of Credit Agricole said that while GDP growth is on the rise, it's not quite booming. Let's unpack what this means for Poland with my guest. Today I'm joined by Piotr Nowak, former Minister of Economic Development and Technology and former advisor to the head of the IMF. Polish Finance Minister Andrzej Domański told us in an interview earlier this month that Poland's economy will grow by at least 3.1%. Good afternoon, and thank you very much for joining us today.
Good afternoon, it's great to be here.
So we see that 3.1%, this is what we're looking at. That's what Poland's finance minister has told us. However, we see fresh reports that economists suggest that this figure will be far lower. What do you think?
I think that Ministry of Finance is kind of conservative on that. I think that Credit Agricole that issued today this lower GDP is out of consensus in the lower end of the whole expectation forecasts. I think that 3.3, 3.1, it's rational. It should be there.
Okay. And we also see that Credit Agricole economists are pointing to the fact that consumers are not picking up their spending quite as much. The interesting fact is that wages are rising, but not as sharply as last year. We also see that perhaps Poles are saving. There's a suggestion that perhaps that is what is happening. There's low inflation, and we would expect that perhaps Poles would be taking advantage of that.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, if you look on the wages, in real term, it grew around 10%, and the spending of the consumers grew around 4%. So it seems like the consumers are delaying the expenditure. I think it's regarding the uncertainty about the future. They are not sure what will happen in the future because you hear lots of news about some companies closing down, there are layoffs. So everyone's thinking about their own job, what will happen in the future. And also the saving rates, it was diminished during the COVID time. So now people are trying to rebuild it for the future, to have discussion for the future. So I think the consumers are spending less, but we will overcome this, I think. The whole environment has to be changed a little bit. The narrative for the last few months was sort of negative. People don't know what will happen with the war at Ukraine, what will happen with overall their enterprises where they work. So I think we'll overcome that and the spendings will come back next year.
Okay, and we also see that there are some weak economic results from the Eurozone, and perhaps most concerning for Poland is actually Germany, and that's also been brought up as a factor that affects Poland the most. Would this explain some of the weak investments that we see amongst Polish companies?
Yes, one of these reasons could be that. I mean, the Germany is sluggish, the economy is really, I don't want to say bad shape, but not the healthiest one. Because probably the prices of energy make the German economy uncompetitive because they compete not inside Europe, they compete with the whole world. And energy prices in US and Asia are much cheaper than in Europe. So that's why German industry lost competitiveness. Plus the Green Deal, Fit for 55, forced them to spend more and more for the production. That's why you can hear that many companies, even from Germany like BASF, the leader in chemical production, moving outside of EU, which is worrying. And this is the biggest economy partner, trade partner. So this is worrying. And also investments in our enterprise, our GDP is falling, private and public, which is also worrying a bit.
So based on what you've just said, if we see that Polish growth is still expected to carry on, maybe not at the same level that we initially expected, but what you've just said about Germany, how can we see that impact Poland in the second half of this year?
I think the second half of the year should be around the same as the last quarter, so we should keep around 3%, more or less, this maybe a little bit accelerating, even to have 3.3, 3.1 for the whole year, because the first quarter is around 2%. So I think it could accelerate. But
keeping in mind the things you've said about Germany, right?
Yeah. But we're still developing below our potential. Our potential is closer to 4%. So there is still negative output gap where we should grow up. And I think there's lots of things government can do, because this is where the government should step in and stimulate investment, right? So this is the opportunity to create fiscal policy that will stimulate investment. Maybe we should create some incentives for companies to invest, or maybe that's a good opportunity to create some incentives for Polish enterprises to take over foreign enterprises outside of Poland. I think this is where our economy, at the stage where we are, we should start expanding and taking over companies outside of Poland.
This is what I wanted to ask you about, because we have the issue of exports and investment very key to economic growth for Poland. And what can the government do, if you could just follow up a little bit, because you just started on that thread, what can the government do to spur on this growth that we need at the moment?
I think there are different pillars that our government can improve the effort they do. One is create incentives. For example, incentives, if Polish company take over majority stake in foreign company, there should be some tax deduction. So stimulate and help them to move that, right? Another thing is to create professional economic diplomacy. I think we missed that for the last 30 years. When you compare this economic diplomacy for Germany, France, Italy, well, we should look from them and learn from them. I think that's the time we should do that. Plus, also, we have this Polish Trade and Investment Agency. This should be professionalized, and I think there's lots of room for improvement there. So that's why we should think about that. Government should think about that and should create some priorities for the markets that we should expand and build the connections there. Because if you want to create, relation with everyone, actually you cannot do it with everyone. We are too small, let's say, too poor country to do that, right? Not efficient. But we should create priorities and move there with the full capacity.
And what do you think those priorities should be? And in terms of the countries, what do you think Poland should prioritize?
I think one of them is Asia, right? Because Asia is the future. If you look on demographic and you look the GDP growth where it's there, technology, I think Asia is one of the main direction we should start building this relation, these bridges, business bridges there. I think Asia is that's the thing. And also, if you look on different industry pillars, like the space industry, I think we don't think about it enough, because space industry is the future also. Look what's going on in US, also China land on the dark side of the moon. This is also the future of the industry. So I think we should focus particularly different sectors, but also on the countries.
But there has been effort on Poland's side to develop a relationship with China. Would you say that not enough effort has been made, or that relationship hasn't been successful enough?
I think it's not enough, because if you look on our export there, it's still small. Usually our exports go to China through Germany. We send our goods to Germany, they put their own logo and send it to China, and they take the biggest margin. We should try to break it and build the relation directly.
And in terms of the space industry, where do you think, how can Poland make a mark in terms of that?
One is to cooperate with European Space Agency, which is good because we increase our payment there, which is decent because whatever we pay there will come back to our space companies for the different projects. But also with US. US is leading there. Maybe you should start invest. We have Polish Development Fund, right? Maybe Polish Development Fund should start invest in some venture capital there, or some startup in the space industry in US. That's why they would cooperate with Polish companies there. So we should think about that.
I have a lot more questions for you, but we're running out of time. I wanted to ask you about the inflation figures that we're expecting to see on Wednesday. We have a lot of conflicting factors there, because we know that utility prices are on the rise. On the one hand, we have weaker consumer spending and also a strong zloty at the moment. Can you just put those factors together for our viewers and just give us a picture of what we might be able to expect?
Yeah, I think that inflation for the second half could go up a little bit. And also we'll see what's happening next year, because next year the prices, this is what is in the law. Maybe government will change it, but the prices, energy prices will go up around 20% from beginning of the year. So this will tick up inflation. Another factor is, which I'm not sure it's included by the market consensus. Central bank thinks about that, about what will happen with Ukraine, right? Because Russia destroyed the energy grid there. What will happen with these people when the winter will come? There is some expectation that few million of people will also move to Poland, right? So this will push the food prices, which central banks think that in the next year they can go up more than market consensus. That's why they project the inflation for the next year around 5.2% on average. Let's wait for November projection inflation, but I think that central bank has credibility on that. And even if you look, for example, because some people I know contest this credibility of central bank, which is fallacy in my opinion, because if you look on Monetary Policy Council, we have every year meeting from IMF under the Article 4 condition. They've never criticized independence of central bank. Very often then emphasize that central bank, Monetary Policy Council, did decent job during the COVID and after that. So let's wait and see, because central bank has the best research department in our country. Whatever people say that, but I think the first impression is that the expectation of inflation in the projection for next year is a bit high, but market consensus is around 4.5. So 5.2, 4.5 is not that big deal. I mean, so let's wait and see. But I think for the second half, inflation will pick up around up to 4%, 4.5.
Okay, and I think one of my final questions, as we're running out of time, is that of the cost of utility costs that are rising, especially water. We hear that it might even go up by 40%. How do you think this will influence inflation?
Well, I think it's influenced rather, spending of the people. That's why you have a lot of this news, right? People see from July that the bills are going up. That's why even they make more money, salaries went up, they postpone consumption. So this is what you see there. So I'm not sure it has a big impact on inflation by itself, because people consume less, spending more for bills. So actually there is no push for the prices. So actually it's very hard to judge.
Okay, thank you very much for this fascinating conversation.
Thank you.
That was Piotr Nowak, former Minister of Economic Development and Technology, on The Bottom Line. For more business stories, check out tvpworld.com and tvpworld_com on X. Thanks so much for joining us on Business Arena. I was your host, Marie Cato. Join us again tomorrow at 5 p.m. CET on TVP World. But for now, don't go away. Coming up next, World Talks with Scott Lucas, Professor of American Studies at University College Dublin.